And thanks so much for joining us on UnboundRadio.com. I'm your host, Sean, from SGTReport.com. You can also check out our other truth site where you get real news 24/7, thelibertymill.com. And right now on the line, I have my good friends, Rory and Peter. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying tuned for our guest, Joe Banister. It is a real thrill for me and an honor to have on the line right now former IRS agent turned whistleblower and one of the stars of the great Aaron Russo documentary from 2006, America, Freedom to Fascism. Joe is also now a host of his own show on the Unbound Radio Network. Joe, welcome. It's just a real honor to have you, sir.
Oh, well, thank you, Sean. The honor's all mine. We're all in this together, trying to row the boat as quickly as we can. So I'll hi to Rory and Peter as well.
Hello.
Hello.
It's just a real honor, and that's what we like to say, Joe. We like to say that we are all in this mess together. And, you know, given all of the problems we now face as a nation and all of the scandals, which Obama has recently called phony scandals, be it Benghazi or the IRS scandal, Fast and Furious, the list is long. Let me read you this quote from Mr. Obama and get your take on it, Joe. And he said, quote, "But with this endless parade of distractions and political posturing and phony scandals, Washington has taken its eye off the ball. And I'm here to say this needs to stop." End quote. Are the IRS scandals phony, Joe? Is it phony that Lois Lerner, IRS Director of Exempt Organization, pled the fifth during an oversight hearing and that documents have gone missing? What's your take?
Well, I do agree that there's political posturing in response to these scandals, but they're by no means phony. You know, as I've actually was on Fox Business and Fox News recently about these IRS scandals, and the sad thing is that the American people don't realize this is what the IRS does to everybody on a daily basis. It's just that most people, you know, aren't aware of it. And kind of like as you walk down the street and around a corner, someone's getting mugged, and there's no noise emanating from the mugging. You're not aware it's going on, but nevertheless, you know, one of your fellow citizens, city dwellers, is being mugged. And that's, I think, what's going on here. This is just a tip of the iceberg, these IRS scandals. And, you know, I did a lot of research over the years that brought me to the conclusion that the IRS was lying to the American people about their income tax obligations. And so I've seen evidence of these scandals coming to fruition throughout the decades, you know, in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And so that's where the political posturing part of Obama's statement is actually true. They will have these dog and pony shows there in Congress and act like they're really going to make a difference and make some changes. And, you know, people get shuffled around and promoted and paid off, and basically it's back to business as usual. And the business as usual, of course, is the fact that the income tax system is a Marxist system. The income tax is one of the 10 communist planks of the Communist Manifesto. And it's doing what it was intended to do, which is to control people, to sop up the inflation that's going on with the Federal Reserve System. And it's completely the opposite, or a lot different than what the American people think that it's designed to do.
I think it's important now to remind people who maybe aren't familiar with you what you went through when you were an IRS agent. And you know, much of your courage and, you know, testimony came right through in that 2006 documentary by Aaron Russo, who sadly is no longer with us, but one of my favorite documentaries. I've watched it several times, America, Freedom to Fascism, and it played a role in helping wake me up. I was waking up in different ways from different pieces of fraud that I was learning about, and that movie really helped round it out for me that, you know, the IRS, I think, could be described best as the collection arm for the Federal Reserve. And you, as a former IRS agent, I think were trying to defend the IRS. Am I getting this right? You wanted to defend the IRS and prove to people who owed money that it was constitutional and that they did owe their taxes. And when you couldn't prove it and you went to your superiors and said, I can't find anything in the law or the bylaws that would suggest that it is constitutional, they told you to shut up, and ultimately, did you get fired?
Basically, I had a bias against people or the information that claimed that the income tax was being illegally administered and enforced, because my entire professional life revolved around the income tax. I had earned my CPA certificate from the state of California. I worked in the private sector in tax and accounting for many years, and then spent, at that time that I started to hear these allegations, about 3 years as an IRS special agent, a criminal investigator. So my bias, if at all, was against the information. But I also was, believed myself to be a very truthful man with integrity, and facts and evidence are what it's all about. And so over a 2-year period, while I still went to work every day as an IRS special agent, I would gather more and more facts, either confirm or deny this basic allegation that I heard on the radio back in 1996, which was that most Americans are not required to file federal income tax returns and pay federal income tax because they're not liable to pay that tax. In other words, there's no statute ever passed by Congress that makes them liable, and that many Americans don't have income as income is defined in the Constitution. And the Supreme Court is the one the group that defined what income is. And most Americans don't have it because income is a gain or an accession to wealth. It has to be separated from the capital that was invested in the first place. And when you think about, most of us who go to work every day and we trade an hour of our time for an hour of pay.
That's right.
We don't have any gain. And, this isn't my opinion. I mean, these are just numerous Supreme Court cases that have said so. And basically the IRS's position is, well, we have the 16th Amendment. It gave us carte blanche authority to do whatever we want. And so shut up and pay up. So that's to put it in a real nutshell. And so the income tax laws are not unconstitutional. It's just that the laws as written only apply to a very limited segment of American society. So what the IRS has done is they've taken very limited laws with very limited scope, and because most Americans don't have the wherewithal to research and examine tax laws and tax regs, then they end up believing what the IRS tells them, which is that, hey, everything is taxable unless we say it's not, rather than the other way around.
It's just so interesting. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head for me. This really crystallizes it, because when we go to work, we trade our labor for money to pay our bills. So it's an even exchange. I'm sacrificing my free time and I'm giving my labor and I'm being compensated for that. And it's interesting to hear that the way the laws are written, that shouldn't qualify as income that's taxable. But it's impossible to fight this system because the IRS has all the guns. They have the enforcement division, and they will ruin your life if you don't pay them.
Well, I would agree it's a challenge. I wouldn't put it as impossible, but I think the problem that the people have is they immediately have, and I don't blame them, a knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, the IRS is lying to me about what I'm supposed to do. Well, I'm going to stop doing it, namely not file and not pay. And I don't agree or encourage that kind of a reaction. I understand, but we have to realize this is an 800-pound gorilla. It's been in place and in existence for decades. And there's a very well-oiled grinding machine waiting for you if you show the IRS your cards. So the better way is to keep your cards close to your vest, learn and educate yourself as much as you can about what the truth is. And, one of the ways that slavery came to an end was because juries stopped convicting people who were accused of, harboring slaves, of helping slaves. And that was a big linchpin to keeping slavery going, was to keep people in fear that they were going to go to prison if they helped black people who were not wanting to be slaves anymore. So it's the same thing here. The IRS can mess with you by taking your freedom or taking your stuff. And so we need to educate our fellow Americans as rapidly as possible So at least one of the legs to that stool, taking your freedom, is done away with, because juries will stop convicting because they don't want, America isn't about political prisoners. America is about justice. And that's the education project, I guess you could say, that's at the forefront of my efforts.
Well, I just commend you for your courage and your bravery, because I know how hard that is to speak truth and to lose in the workplace and lose your income and to risk all that. It takes a real man of honor to do that. And my hat's off again. It's just a real pleasure to have you on. In the 3 minutes we have before we go to break, my two contributors at sgtreport.com that help put up content, really high quality content from a variety of sources on a daily basis, Peter and Rory, are on the line. Gentlemen, do either of you have a question for our friend Joe Banister?
Yeah, Joe. I had a quick question about an article that appeared on CNS News on July 24th. Obama denounces Congress is focusing on phony scandals, promises executive action, and, these scandals like the one that you're talking about with the IRS. And my initial thought was, what exactly do they mean by executive action? What could he take? Do you have any thought on that?
You mean what kind of executive action Obama could take in response to these scandals?
Exactly.
Well, I guess there's what he could do and what we expect he will do. I'd probably start with the latter first. The expectation is that, this kind of a system that controls people in the way it does, it instills fear in them and can rob them of their property overnight. Can't put you in jail overnight, but certainly there's a fear of that. So the expectation is that Obama doesn't want to touch this system at all. I believe that Lemmings in his administration helped to orchestrate this whole Tea Party mess. Because, again, that's what the IRS does. It's about control. And because it's an executive branch agency, it's absolutely been abused over the decades, and Obama's just the latest guy in the driver's seat. And so this is happening exactly the way he wants it to. He's getting to control politics and political activity and efforts. And then he can even use the scandals to take away attention from the bigger scandal. So I think actually he's benefiting from it. And in terms of executive action that he could do, of course, if he really cared about people and the rule of law and having integrity in taxation, he would absolutely fire anyone who was in that chain of command that had done these things. Because I can assure you, in the Treasury Rules of Conduct and in federal law, including the IRS Restructuring and Reform Act, these are firing offenses. So that's what could happen. He could actually clean house and send a message to everyone else in the IRS that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. But I can pretty much assure you that will not happen, because this kind of activity is actually par for the course. It's what the Obama administration, the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, you can go back as far as you want. This is their little tool, their little Praetorian Guard in the IRS that can do these things behind the scenes. In this case, they just got caught because there were a lot of very vocal people, such as the ACLJ group, and people who aren't afraid to speak up, and God bless them for doing so.
Yeah, what's so scary about it, Joe, too, is that you mentioned justice earlier, and there is no more justice. Without rule of law, how can we have justice? We seem to be moving further and further away from rule of law, and there seems to be less and less justice for the American people. Before we throw to Rory, who I know has a question for you, why don't you tell us about your Unbound radio show? I think it just speaks to your dedication to being a truth teller, because as you and I both know, this radio show doesn't pay. We do it. It's a labor of love. What day of the week is your show on?
It's actually also on Saturdays, Sean, and it's from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. And I'm really grateful to the network for having me aboard, and of course the opportunity is awesome, but also the great hosts such as yourself. We got a great group of people, and really dedicated to getting the word out. So I'm just so happy to be aboard. It's called Agent for Truth. is the name of the radio show.
Oh, great. And do you put those up on YouTube at all? Is there any other way people can listen, or do they just log into unbound.com and then search out your vault, your archive?
Yeah, unbound.com is best. Of course, it's linked at agentfortruth.com, which is my website. I'm a little bit technically challenged when it comes to just getting things up on YouTube, quickly. But I do intend to get at least some of that content up. Been at it only for a month or two, so I got to get a little more content probably before I do that.
Again, I think it speaks to your dedication to being a truth teller and just an honorable American, because, as I said, if anybody's under the delusion that Unbound Radio or any radio hosts make a lot of money, in our case, it's all volunteer at unboundradio.com, and Shep and Joe Joseph have moved heaven and earth to get this internet radio show up and running, and I think it's a great avenue for truth. We have 4 minutes left in the show with Joe Banister. Our thanks to him for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us. Rory, you've been so patient today. My apologies. You've not been able to get a word in edgewise. Your question for Joe.
Yes, thank you very much. Joe, the understanding that I have is that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get a case heard at the federal level, and they're usually kicked back to the state level because the states have income tax laws on the books, whereas, as you explained earlier, the federal government does not. And I was wondering if you could enlighten me to that aspect of it, and if the understanding I have is correct, how would an average citizen go about, challenging these laws?
Excellent question, Rory. No, I don't think that, in my experience, that many cases get kicked back to the states per se, but I think the bigger problem, bigger impediment, is that there is the administrative law, the administrative phase of these tax disputes is so massive. They basically do, and I was talking about the grinding machine, they have, and again, this is all Soviet-style stuff. They've created this huge administrative bureaucracy to grind you up before you even could get to a judicial branch arena. And that's federal or state. And of course, I've been through it myself personally, to be the guinea pig that can, the canary in the coal mine maybe, that barely made it back out, to warn people that this administrative state is there as the biggest impediment, and both for the federal system of tax, income tax, and the state income tax systems. You'll spend months, if not years, and thousands of dollars just to get through the administrative procedures, because you have to exhaust your administrative procedures before you can get into court. If you get into court before you've exhausted them, the court will kick it back to the administrative phase and say, sorry, you didn't exhaust your administrative procedures. So it's this, out of the frying pan into the fire type situation where they've already got this nice little, dance card already ready for you, to just grind you up and slow you down and not give you any due process and wrap you, have you chasing your tail. So the due process is really just a facade, and that's the biggest problem I see. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Well, Joe, thank you, Rory. And Joe, thank you so much for your time today. We only have a minute left. Can you tell people where they should go? Is there a website? Is there any books they should read on if they're thinking about trying to take this system on, which I don't know that I'd recommend, because as I stated before, this system has all the guns and the enforcement. What would you do if people want to learn more about what they can do to, fight back and take some of their own personal liberty back?
Well, I do have a section on my agentfortruth.com website called Become an Agent for Truth, where I try to give people an idea of the landscape that faces us all. The minefield is probably a better metaphor. So if they go to agentfortruth.com and then become an agent for truth, there's kind of a little roadmap there to some more information where people can consider and apply this landscape or minefield lives.
Excellent.
And also, I would encourage America Freedom to Fascism. I've heard from more people, including yourself, that was kind of the wake-up call. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it is a wake-up call, and this is a wake-up call. Our thanks to Joe Banister for his time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.